Today, we'll talk about the last technical chapter, that is about repair. Before you read the chapter, I'd like you to think about these questions. The first one is, what questions can repair address? So the CA researchers found this phenomenon called repair, and this repair are organized to answer some question, and I'd like you to find what that question is. And also, I'd like you to identify the difference between these two excerpts. It's excerpt 39 and excerpt 40. And I'd like you to be able to analyze these two data and then identify the differences and why these two differences are important in CA. And also, when you read, after you read this chapter, I'd like you to be able to answer this question. Number one, the excerpt in page 67, the very first excerpt by Shogoloff and Jefferson and Harvey Sachs, there's this excerpt I'd like you to be able to answer. This excerpt tells us that repair and explain. And particularly notable passages here, meaning you pick a few passages and then explain. By this, Shogoloff et al. Wants to highlight the fact. And then from this, we can infer that repair and so on. So this can be a practice for you to use a source text to produce your own understanding and your argument. There are some key issues that I'd like you to think about while we are working on this chapter. Number one, the nature of the problem. So repair is a practice where speakers are fixing something. So you're fixing some problems, and there are some different kinds of problems. It could be linguistic forms, it could be programmatic content, or problem of understanding. And there are some challenging aspects in differentiating them. And also, I'd like you to think about the sequence of repair. So it has an initiation part and actual repair part, and that was exemplified in excerpt 45 and 46. And then another question that I'd like you to be able to answer at the end. Shogoloff and Harvey Sachs and Jefferson argue that there are structural reasons why self-repair is preferred over other repair. On what grounds is this argument made? So there are some reasons why self-repair rather than other repair are preferred. Find the answer. And then later on, we're going to talk about the difference between repair and correction. And this is an example. So SLA, second language acquisition research, treats this data as a correction, but in the CA researchers are focusing more on the repair. So they provide a different interpretations of this data. So try to figure this out. And the difference between repair and corrections, I have another examples that I'd like you to work on in excerpt 31. Okay, let's begin with the text. So repair. The first line says, repair refers to the phenomenon in which participants in a conversation fix a turn in speaking. So you're fixing some kind of maybe a problem. So later on, line 3, in the paper, repair was described as something that operates in conversation addressed to recurrent problems in speaking, hearing, and understanding. So there's a problem, but the nature of the problem could be a speaking problem or a hearing problem if others make it problematic, or understanding not just the linguistic forms, but you may not understand the content of it, although you hear all the words correctly, and so on. So there's a different kinds of problems. Okay, so let's look at this passage. Pretty important passage from what's called repair paper by these three authors. The sort of actions underwritten by the practices of repair are not limited to correction, nor are their target limited to errors, hence the use of term repair and repairable and trouble source. There can be trouble grounded in other than mistakes, the unavailability of words such as a name, one needs, and so on. Hearing problems injured by interference by ambient noise, and uncertain hearing or understanding in search of confirmation and the like. And on the intervention side, there can be practices directed to other than a correction. For example, searching for a word, requesting repetitions, or offering a candidate hearing or understanding for confirmations or replacement. So the three authors talking about the scope of repairable. One needs to be corrected or one needs to be repairable. It's not just about grammatical mistakes. It's much larger concept. Sometimes people repair when there's no apparent problems. So we have to think that repair maybe covers a wide range of phenomena. Now later on in line here, the next paragraph, the reasons why repair is important in CA is that it offers some basic mechanisms through which participants in interaction can address problems locally and interactionally. They find problems, estimate the relevance, and they act on it accordingly. Just as turn-taking mechanisms explain the basic operations of conversational exchanges, the practice of repair also reveals the interactional mechanisms through which participants picks problematic turns in their exchange. So as I noted, when I talked about turn-taking and the repair, preference and urgency pair, these are sort of underlying generic mechanisms through which people do all kinds of things, right? So since these are regular features in conversation, that tells us about how participant in conversations deals with the problems or carry out their social actions. So repair is one mechanism in which participants deal with some problems in the course of conversation. So these are a fairly important concept in CA. So repair, based on the nature of the problems, we can classify them. It may be a linguistic problems that shows here, line 3 in excerpt 39. He slept very early. He fell asleep at 9:30. So this is a linguistic problem. But then next one, excerpt 40, I told that officer. So we say maybe this person was going to say cop and then repairs it to officer. So much more formal term. So if you look at, if you think about the situations, this is a courtroom, then this person is correcting his or her turn to fit the context, in the formal context. And then excerpt 41, the change here is caused by problems of understanding. So A says, I thought it was an interesting issue regarding the work. And regarding what? The work, the job. Oh, so it's a hearing problem. I didn't hear you correctly, and so on. So the last paragraph of the page, from this excerpt we can see that repairs are concerned not only with grammatical forms and pragmatic sense, but also with matters performance that may have been occasioned by mishearing or misunderstanding. Repair also occur even when there are no apparent problems. Given the wide scope of that which is repairable, therefore, we can infer that repair is general and generic phenomenon that is regularly put to use in interaction exchange. This also means that tracing repair sequences analytically involves identifying emergent problems in conversation exchange, contingent logic, and problem solving that is only available in the details of interaction in progress. So when we identify problems in conversation, it is caused in the conversation within the context, and then if that problem is solved, then people who are in the conversation identify the problem and handles it there. So that's why it's called a locally and interactionally handled problems. So it helps researchers or participants pay attention or focus on details of interactions, and that's what is very strong about conversation analysis, analytically. Now, the next part is a repair sequence. Repair sequence meaning you have a process in a repair. And process is a twofold. One is initiation part and actual repair part, so which is presented in the first paragraph. According to Shegoloff and et al., repair consists of two parts, namely initiation and repair. Initiation refers to the process whereby participants identify a problem before they address it. In initiation, the speaker will point out, hint, or refer to the possible problem. It can be instigated by the person who produced the problem or by a different person, the other. Regarding this, Shegoloff et al. Draws a distinction between self-initiated, other-initiated repair. Okay? So, two-part initiation and actual repair, and then two party can do these things, like a self and other. So we can have four scenarios presented here. Types of repair: self-initiated self-repair, other-initiated self-repair, self-initiated other repair, other-initiated other repair. So 43 through 46, it's an example of number 1, number 2, and number 3, and number 4. So I'm not going to go through. Except in noting that excerpt 43 was a self-initiated self-repair, but excerpt 44 is, let's take a look. Hey, the first time they stopped me from selling cigarette was this morning. And then 1 second pause, that is preferred in a second. And then from selling cigarette and from buying cigarette. So from selling cigarette is initiating repair. It's not actual repair. It's initiating the repair. So that was done by other, which is number 2. But then actual repair was done by self. The self meaning the producer of the problems in A in this case. Okay. Now, excerpt 45 is very interesting. It's a case of other initiated and other repair. And when you think about it, when we are in a conversation, we don't go around and fixing other people's problems. So generally speaking, self, the problem source, are the one who fix the problem. But there are some occasions other people correct the mistakes or problems. So that is the case in number 45. So it's a service encounter. C is a customer and S is salesman. C says, the wells are wider apart than that. Then salesman says, okay, let me see if I can find one with a wider thread. And then later on, he says, how's this? And then she says, nope, the threads are even wider than that. Here the problem is whales. But then line 2, S corrected it. Replace it with thread, wider thread. So initiation and repair was done in one line. So other initiation, other repair was done in one turn. But then in line 4, nope, the threads are even wider than that. Now C incorporate the correction in his own turn, as if nothing happens. So repair was embedded in the course of conversation. So it's called embedded correction. Later on, Jefferson in 87, meaning one in which repair is incorporated into the ongoing talk. Now, as I said, people won't go around and fixing other people because it could be a threat to other people. It could challenge their competence or knowledge or whatever expertise people have on a particular matter or knowledge. So that's why when other corrections are done, it's done probably indirectly or secretly or done quickly in order not to infringe upon other person's, the pride and competence and so on. But occasionally, these issues are exposed. And when it gets exposed, it could mean something serious challenge to interpersonal relationship, which is the case in 46. A says, I changed the oil, put an oil filter, completely redid the oily system, had to put new gasket, then oil fan to stop the leak, and then I put, and then R says that was a gas leak. It was a other correction done in there. But then A refuses and insists, saying it was an oil leak, buddy. And then R says it's a gas leak. It's an oil leak. Right? So it's a case of why other repair is pretty risky things in interpersonal relations. So let's read in that part. Unlike embedded corrections, this exposed correction shows that both participants are intensely involved in insisting and opposing. This tells us how other repair can be regarded as a threat to one's competence and thus influence how speakers relate to one another in conversation. Okay? So that tells us that maybe self-correction is preferred over other correction. In fact, statistically speaking, there are a lot of self-corrections done, and in other corrections are relatively rare. Okay? So let me, in this sections, I kind of introduce how self-correction is preferred structurally, right? Which means during the conversations, self has a better position to repair even before others notice the problem. So there's three cases, and for the interest of time, I won't go over. But one example would be, for example, excerpt 40. So let's read that part. One reason for this preference is that opportunities for self-initiation come before opportunities for other initiation. So for example, in excerpt 40, I told that to the officer. So even before turn ends, the self can correct it, even before others have an access to the problems, and so on. So there are a couple of other examples to demonstrate why self-correction is structurally preferred. Page 72, let me conclude later on around here. The fact that self-repair is preferred indicates that while self-repair represents both the norm or market and therefore familiar form of speech, other repairs are consequently likely to be special cases that demands particular types of attention and interactional intervention. Such cases are found across various professional settings, particularly in the pedagogical setting where interactions are often intended to instruct or teach. Shegelov pointed out that adult-child interaction is a case in which highly constrained other correction occurs frequently. So self-repair are known. We are much more familiar with self-repair. But occasionally there are other other corrections happens. And one prime example is a teaching situation. Teachers or parents can correct students or children's mistakes. So that's where other repair comes into play. And that's where interesting phenomena happens in classroom interactions. Lastly, I'd like to briefly mention about the difference between repair and corrections. And this issue will be mentioned in chapter 4 later on, so we'll explore this issue more fully. But for now, I'd like you to think about this question first. I'm going to read the first paragraph under that sections. In SLA research, there are a substantial number of studies on interactional modifications. The idea here is that during a conversation exchange, linguistic problems by non-native learners are noticed and corrected by more proficient speakers, such as native speakers or teacher. In applied linguistics, the term repair is often used to refer to problematic LTUs and its corrections, so on, particularly in reference to the replacement of language errors, and so on. So if you look at the data in excerpt 12, presented by Lowen and Ferb in their very famous paper, here students and teachers interaction. Student says, to her is a good thing, to her is a good thing. Then teacher says, yeah, for her it's a good thing. And student says, because she's got a lot of money there. Now, from this data, we first notice that teacher is correcting student mistakes. So instead of to her, teacher says for her. So teacher is modifying student talk. So that's what's called interactional modification or recast and so on. But then if you follow interactionally, then we would see there are some issue of understanding. So let me quickly go over that issue in page 74. And here I explain the difference between repair and correction. The idea here is if you as a researchers, if you focus only on linguistic problems, then you are bound to look at only those features of linguistic features. And then you recognize language teachers and students, and teachers' role is to correct student problems and so on. But I would argue that underlying the data, if you look at the data more closely, there's an issue of understanding. So take a look at excerpt 12. Teacher says, yeah, for her it's a good thing. But then student says, because she's got a lot of money there. So if you look at 1 or 3, we learn that as the student, we learn how as understand teacher's tone. Right? So when she says, because she got a lot of money there, we can infer that student thought that teacher understood what he was talking about in line 100. So he moved on, right? So although teacher's correction was designed to be a pedagogical instruction, student didn't treat the teacher's turn that way. It's just a matter of understanding. Oh, teacher, you understand what I was saying in line 100, so I moved on. So there's an issue of repair that is about understanding, and also there's an issue of corrections that was about correcting linguistic mistakes. And the point here in the next page is let's not confuse this thing. And then I would argue that understanding or repair is a much larger generic problem under which correction is one part of repair issue. So try to figure that out as you read this page. And let me conclude this section. Repair is very important phenomena where analysts can see how people identify problems in the course of interaction and fix it. And if you look at their problems very closely, then we would learn that people's assumption, intention, their knowledge and competence about what is being done in the course of conversation. So rather than imposing external categories like the native speaker, non-native speakers, linguistic problems, and so on, we want to understand the conversation as the participants experience. And that's the key point in doing all of this. And particularly repair help us see all kinds of interesting phenomena are deployed in conversation. Okay? Right. I hope this helps you understand repair, and we'll talk about conversation exchange in a professional setting from next time. Thank you.